the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. For thousands of years, humans have built large structures and temples in an attempt to represent the majesty and grandeur of their gods. These structures have frequently been referred to as God's house. Even many people in the Christian faith have adopted the mindset that we gather in God's house. However, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, never expressed a desire for those types of structures. In fact, God had a much different idea, an idea that seemed inferior to many of his faithful followers. His idea, a tent. Church people use the big word tabernacle. I know, it sounds impressive, but really, all that means is tent. Literally, a fixed or movable dwelling, typically of light construction. Now you may be asking yourself, what does any of this have to do with "so the Word became human and made his home among us"? The phrase "made his home among us" literally means Jesus put on flesh, a temporary dwelling or tent, and moved into our neighborhood. The world we live in is full of brick and mortar structures that many people call church, but in reality, it is only a church's building. You may have noticed that all of the images so far have been church buildings. Literally, the million-dollar question is, what do these images have in common? There are no people, no life in any of them. In fact, these buildings are useless without life inside of them. That sounds a lot like heaven. Wow, that must be a grandiose place. But it has no Jesus. If it did not have God's presence, if it were void of angels, we would be very disappointed. But we know heaven already has angels and God's presence in the heavenly courts. However, Jesus decided it was no place at all if you and I weren't there with the angels, cherubim, and seraphim in his presence with him. So what did Jesus do? He came near. He came near and he loved. He loved everyone. And everyone was literally his enemy until he befriended them. His goal was to make sure heaven was inhabited by as many humans as would possibly accept him as the creator of everything and the ruling, reigning king of eternity. So he came. He loved. He suffered pain, disloyalty, hate, and friends that abandoned him. He ate with us. He drank with us. He fished with us. He sat around fire pits with us. He went to funerals with us. He gave up the comfort of heaven to be where other humans were. That was his priority. He didn't set an example of sitting in a comfortable dwelling. He was always on the go. Jesus is incarnate, God's presence in a tent of flesh. He never said to build a solid structure and invite people to come to see how impressive it made him look. He commanded us to go in our tent body and dwell with others so they could experience his presence through us. In Acts, we see that even the disciples and the apostles taught this. Our ancestors carried the tabernacle with them through the wilderness. It was constructed according to the plan God had shown Moses. Years later, when Joshua led our ancestors in battle against the nations that God drove out of this land, the tabernacle was taken with them into their new territory. And it stayed there until the time of King David. David found favor with God and asked for the privilege of building a permanent temple for the God of Jacob. But it was Solomon who actually built it. However, the Most High doesn't live in temples made by human hands. As the prophet says, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Could you build me a temple as good as that?" asked the Lord. "Could you build me such a resting place? Didn't my hands make both heaven and earth?" So Jesus tells us, as you go, make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach them to follow all I have commanded you, and I will be with you until the end of the age. He says, I am sending you as my Father has sent me. Now that you know this, the only response can be to do this. Find a fire pit, a table, a garage, a yard that welcomes you, and let people who would never have known his unfailing love, faithfulness, and glory without having experienced it through you.